The first speaker will be Frank Nielsen from the École Polytechnique here in Paris. So Frank Nielsen is one of the leading experts in computational information geometry, which is a fairly recent field that blends statistics, information theory, differential geometry, and computation. Okay, so we are eager to hear from this new field. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. So everybody is hearing me at the end, at the back? Okay, no problem. So it's my great pleasure and a great honor to give this talk this morning. So last 2 days we had very interesting talks on some historical part of Shannon, his life, his spread of research and his creativity with many pictures. And maybe this talk is more related to the talk by Professor Auger on machine learning and black box optimization. So I will not talk about natural gradient, but you will see where it kicks in the picture. So there's also a big debate on what is information. So we talk about entropy, thermodynamics, and information entropy. And maybe the title is a bit surprising because I use two notions. One notion is dual geometry. So this will be very clear in a few minutes. And another notion that may surprise people, Shannon information instead of Shannon entropy. So for us, Shannon information is a negative Shannon entropy. So basically, it will be a convex function. It will be a formula. Okay, we don't have any philosophical issue on semantics or message. So the talk is organized as follows. There are three parts. The first part will be a scratch course on information geometry, and I will try to, for those who are not familiar with the field, to explain it very easily from the formula of Shannon entropy, how the different entities that we manipulate in information geometry are popping up. So I will talk about concepts like exponential families and so on. Then because we talk about geometry, I will talk about invariance and what is the concept of invariance in information geometry. This is very important because this is kind of giving the foundation of information geometry. And I will then revisit some of the things that I have explained before with words of geometry like projection. What is an information projection, okay? So this will be the tutorial part of information geometry, and it's going to maybe take quite a while to go to that stage. And then I will present one recent work, which is the Chernoff information, and I will see how we can define Shannon information and visualize where it is in terms of information geometry. Okay, so this will, with the tools we will have explained before, you will have one recent work on how to characterize Chernoff information with information geometry. And the last two items will be about giving a panorama of recent activities on geometric information clustering, and also on a panorama on statistical distances, their properties, and so on. And because we have to talk also about perspectives of information theory, I will give you at the end my viewpoint of one potential direction to go. And that's the plan. So let me begin this mini tutorial. And so we start with Shannon entropy, and we are going to derive a few concepts related to it. So first of all, Shannon entropy, I'm not talking about thermodynamics, Boltzmann-Gibbs, and so forth. I just take it as a formula that gives the amount of uncertainty of some random variable, okay? So these are the two well-known formulae that we write maybe in two different forms, whether we manipulate a mass function, probability mass function, you know, this formula here. And then we have a different calling for the continuous case that we call differential entropy. And actually, there's a lot of discrepancy between those two notions. Okay, the formula looks very similar, where the sum is replaced by a Stieltjes integral, but it's different. So if you use Kolmogorov probability measure unification, you can write entropy as this kind of formula here. And if your variable is dominated by a measure mu, you will have this formula here, okay? And this formula generalizes, if you take a counting measure, you will get this one, and if you take a Lebesgue measure, you will get this one, okay? But actually, there are very crucial differences between entropy and differential entropy. First, for the discrete entropy, we know that it is always bounded, so it's always finite, and it's bounded by the number of letters in your alphabet, okay? And it's positive. On the other hand, differential entropy, it might be negative. So if you take a Gaussian distribution with mu sigma, depending on your standard variation, you can make this, this is the formula you will get by computing the integral, and this can be made negative if here it's less than 1, and you can do it, right? And also you have the case that it can be infinite too, and a typical example is if you take this density defined on this support, then the integral diverges. So I will talk about entropy as a formula minus p log p from now on, but it can be fairly different concept from discrete and continuous, okay? Yeah, maybe I should try another pointer. Okay, let me, I bring mine because I kind of notice it, but okay, let's see. So to define Shannon information, as I said, you can take it as a negative entropy, okay, as a definition, and we will see why it's important. It's, okay, it's better, right? And you will see that Shannon information is a convex function. So if you take the negative, you will get this parabola, this kind of parabola shape function. It's not a parabola because this is a thing here. So if you take a Bernoulli random variable with parameterized by p, you get this binary entropy, and you draw the graph, you will get that. Okay. So Shannon information is convex, and this convexity is going to bring a lot of structure, geometrically speaking. Okay. What we can do when we make inference, we can use a Maxent entropy defined by Jens in the late 50s. So if we are given a set of moment constraints, okay, I write the moment constraints ti x, expectation for distribution equal eta I, okay. I have a set of constraints, and if you solve this constraints optimization problem using the Lagrangian, what you will find is that you will find that the solution is a member of an exponential family that can be written in that term, okay. And here, this notation just means dot product. Okay. So somehow, here we didn't introduce parameters, but if we have a set of constraints here, we will have a parametric distribution. And this theta, we will call it natural parameters, and those theta, we will call it expectation parameters. Okay. So exponential families are very common objects in statistics. They are very well studied, and they bring a lot of structures. So first of all, because it is a density, if you integrate to your exponential family, which is this canonical expression here, it's a distribution, you will get that the f of theta here has this expression, and you can show that it is strictly convex. And in our case, I will not bother about careful details. I will even assume that it is infinitely differentiable. Okay. And from that, you can define the set of potential parameters theta by capital theta here as a natural space where you define all the distribution belonging to your exponential family. Okay. So if I give you Tx a carrier measure here, you define an exponential family. And there's a lot of things we can do with exponential family because of their structures. For example, we know that they have all finite order moments. So for example, Cauchy distribution, which do not have finite moments, is not an exponential family, but the usual distribution we manipulate like Gaussian or gamma or Bernoulli, and many of them are exponential family in disguise once you rewrite them in that canonical form. And for those exponential family, for example, the moment generating function, so Merwan talked about how to compute the moments quickly using CX transformation, but here for exponential family, the moment generating function writes like that, okay, according to the cumulant function f, okay. And we have, from that, we can derive, for example, that the expectation of t of x is nabla f, so the gradient of f at theta. And this is actually eta here, and the variance is the Hessian, okay? And it's positive definite matrix. So for example, if you ask what is the maximum entropy distribution that has a given mean and variance, you know that it is a Gaussian distribution, right? And you will find that, okay, the well-known Gaussian distribution. And this Gaussian distribution, you can rewrite it as an exponential family, where the natural parameters here will be defined according to your usual parameterization that you are familiar with, okay? We call usually that the lambda parameters. And the function that I said that was strictly convex and differentiable, the log normalizer or Kuhlmann function, in that case, you will retrieve it like that once you write this according to that. And by construction, the expectation of the statistics, the constraints that you had here, tx and x squared, will be eta, okay, in your Maxent, this is a linear constraint that you put, and in that case it will be equivalent, it will be that quantity. So it's very easy to compute the entropy of an exponential family because if you make the structure of p of x and you compute this integral, actually you find that this is this expression here. And this expression, because f is strictly convex, you can manipulate the convex conjugate that I will denote by f star, okay? So by Young inequality, we have f star eta plus f theta is greater than this dot product, okay? And in case that eta corresponds to the theta parameter, we have this equality here, okay? So once you have a convex function, you always have a dual convex conjugate, and you can write the entropy here as minus, I told you entropy is concave and f star is convex, right? So battery faible. Okay, it's scaring me a bit. Maybe we need to plug, maybe some, I don't know even, it's not my laptop, so, okay, I will let you do. So what you have to be careful from now on is because we have a convex function, we always have a dual convex function, and we have also two canonical parameterization, the theta, that is called the natural parameter, and the eta, which is usually called the moment or expectation parameters, and you can go from one to the other if you know how to compute the gradient of the convex conjugate, okay? And converting eta to theta can also be interpreted as a Maxent problem, okay? So for very simple case like Gaussian or gamma or things like that, you have it in closed form. But for interesting problems, usually you don't have this this problem of converting parameters eta to eta is rarely in closed form. So now, let me introduce one statistical distance and make the link with Maxent, the Kullback-Leibler divergence. So here we have two distributions, P and Q, and we define the relative entropy called Kullback-Leibler distance as this formula, P log P over Q. And it's a statistical distance, but it's not a metric distance because it is first asymmetric, and second, it doesn't satisfy a triangular inequality, okay? And if you play with Jensen inequality, you will prove Gibbs inequality that QL is equal to 0 if and only if P equals to Q, okay? Again, QL may be infinite. For example, if I take a Cauchy distribution, which I said was not an exponential family, and here you take standard normal distribution, which is an exponential family, then you will find that QL, PQ, this integral diverges, okay, so equal infinity, but the reverse is finite, okay? And now we can revisit the Maxent formalization as follows. First, instead of doing maximum concave entropy, I do minimum convex optimization, okay? I remove the minus here and I put the mean. And then this is a constraint, this is my E of ti xg equal eta j, okay? So this is the thing, and here I put it in the discrete case, okay? So we can see that Maxent amounts to a convex minimization, basically, right? And now we can even more give some structures that if we introduce a uniform distribution for which you know in the discrete case the entropy is the log of the cardinality of the alphabet. Okay, so here in infinite case, if I have an alphabet of size n, it will be log n. And if we rewrite the p log p over q as follow, so here we have minus p log q plus p log p, so it's p log p over q. We can make it two terms, the cross entropy here, and the entropy that can be seen as the cross entropy of the distribution with itself. Okay. So because when we maximize in Maxent the concave entropy, we can reinterpret it as a minimization of the Kullback-Leibler divergence of our distribution that we seek to get to U, the uniform distribution. Okay. So now, if instead of taking U, I take a different prior distribution, not U but H, okay, and I do the same Lagrangian solving of the optimization problem, I got the usual canonical, more generic canonical parameterization of exponential family. What has just changed here is I have H term. Okay, if it were uniform, it will be 1 over something, right? And because it is positive, you can also introduce k equals log h, and you will get this log likelihood of an exponential family that is written like that, and this is log concave because f is strictly convex, as I said. Okay. So now we have a bit more general entropy formula for that case, and because we introduce this distribution, prior distribution h. I will show you how it plays later. This is called the carrier term. And for example, if you take a usual distribution like a Rayleigh distribution, you will see this carrier distribution being non-zero. If you take Gaussian, it's 0, so it's here it's h of x is 1. So let's go now to maximum likelihood estimator. Okay, we have a set of m observations, okay, that are IID. And we try to infer the parameter of the exponential family. So this is, if I take the joint likelihood here, under independence I have that. I take the log, which is a monotonic increasing function, so I have this average log likelihood here. And basically what we need to do to get a maximum estimate is to set the gradient to 0, okay? And if I do it, we have what is called normal equation of MLE by setting that. And here you will see that it's very easy to get the solution in the eta parameter space, in the eta coordinate system. It will be just the average of the TSI, which are called sufficient statistics. I will explain later on what is sufficiency. So MLE, what you have to remember for now is that MLE is a linear optimization in eta, but it's convex optimization in theta. Okay, if I do the same thing for theta, I will end up with this optimization here. Okay, and MLE has many good properties, as you know. It is consistent, and we can even compute very in closed form what will be the average likelihood at the MLE point. So what I want, what's the point? The point is that I presented Maxent as a minimization of KL divergence, and I choose one side, you remember? And here I present MLE, and I show you that MLE now can be interpreted as a minimization, again, of a KL, a Kullback-Leibler divergence, but here on the right side, okay? A minimization of what? If I introduce the empirical distribution, then, and I do this expansion, and then because this doesn't depend on my parameter, I can remove it from the optimization. I will end up with maximizing this criterion, which is by definition the criterion maximized by MLE. Okay? So you have seen two things, Maxent and MLE are basically maximization or minimization of KL divergence of something. Okay? This was the point. Actually, by the way, by introducing data by introducing the empirical distribution, you do something very strong, is that you put the data and the model in the same probability space somehow, right? So you can manipulate them. So now the last element in the Shannon galaxy I want to introduce before wrapping up and getting to more geometric aspect of it is the Fisher information that was already introduced. So in information geometry, people are lazy writing, so we do it like that. We say partial I of the log likelihood for the partial derivative, okay? And then the Fisher information matrix, which you can write like that, okay? You can show that it is a positive semi-definite matrix, okay? And what was very strong in the birth of information geometry in the 1930s, 45 by Kramer-Rao, is that you have also a lower bound on any unbiased estimator according to the inverse of the Fisher information matrix here, okay? And just to finish on MLE, we know that it is efficient because efficiency is defined as it matches the lower bound, okay? And because our observation can be considered as random variables, and basically our set of observation as a random vector, we can show that the MLE estimator, which is a random variable itself, is asymptotically normal distribution according to Fisher information matrix. So this is going to close the very first part, which is to introduce the terms. So we've seen in Fisher information, Kullback-Leibler divergence. Everything has been derived from entropy, right? Entropy and Maxent, and I have derived everything from that, okay? So what did I say? I said, okay, Shannon entropy is concave. Maxent, which do max concave is mean convex and is an exponential family, leads exponential families. And exponential families have dual canonical parametrization, so there are two dual coordinate systems that are related by Legendre transformation. The theta will be called the natural and the eta is the expectation. So from now on, I will play with color. I will play with red for primal and blue for dual, okay? And I show you that there are two kind of things we can write as a minimization of Kullback-Leibler divergence, depending on whether we minimize on the left argument or the right argument. I show you for Maxent, you minimize on the left argument. For MLE, you minimize on the right argument. And the point will be to show you that this is information projection now, right, and as a tutorial part. And then I introduce Fisher information matrix as motivated by the Kramer-Rao lower bound, but it will play in the geometry from now on, okay? So chapter 2 is about invariance and geometry. When we talk about geometry, basically we want to deal with geometric objects. So geometric object can be parameterized by any kind of coordinate system, but should be invariant to change of coordinate systems, right? This is the philosophy. So we heard about group of transformation before, but the generic notion is that if it can make you happy to change a coordinate system to be faster for computing, do it. And, but be sure that you are not biased by your representation, so that we can perform intrinsic computation, okay? And once you have a convex function, okay, you can always build something that is called a dually flat structure, okay? Convex function, you can generate something that generalizes Euclidean geometry, and I will show you how. And what happens is that in the exponential family, the f that I call the log normalizer or cumulative function, I show you that it is strictly convex, right? So from this path, I can get some structure, and I will play with it in information projection very soon now. But if I play with mixture family in information geometry, I will take the negative entropy, which is again convex, and I will define from this f function another dually flat space, and so on, okay? So the key point is that to get a convex function, you get a dual space that I will explain now, and then to interpret what are the properties of the dual space for your application domain. For example, it has also been used for mathematical programming, where you have barrier functions, which are convex functions, and people use this dual geometry to do things algorithmically because it has structures. Okay, I will present that now. First, I want to emphasize that the Kullback-Leibler divergence we have been using as a generalization of Maxent has three remarkable properties. The first property is that it's obvious I can write it as a separable divergence. We heard the keyword separability for minimization in black box optimization the other day. And this is the same spirit, is that you have an integral here, and you can write the integral as KL. So it can be a sum if it is discrete, okay? So important thing is that it is not correlated between the x, okay, on the support. And here my small capital KL is just A log A over B, okay? It's a 1D function. So for example, if you take the square Euclidean distance, it's separable, but if you put the square root, you cannot, right? And if you take Malanobis, you cannot, okay? The second important properties of KL is that you have a key concept in information geometry that is called information monotonicity. What does it mean? My KL divergence is defined between two distributions on a support, okay, X. Now, if I coarsen the support, I make, let's say that on my alphabet, I make a partition into J groups, okay? I can define then the distribution on the smaller size alphabet, that we call P, Y, and QI. Okay, this is kind of a coarse-grained quantization, you can see that. Then what you have is that the KL of the uncoarse, like the normal support, with the support that has been quantized, is greater or equal, okay? And the third very important thing that we also heard in the talk of Anne Auger yesterday is that the KL is locally equivalent to a quadratic Phim distance. Okay, so the KL between two very close distributions is basically written like that in terms of Malanobis distance. Malanobis distance for positive definite matrix is that. And here we put the information matrix. Okay? So this is three very remarkable properties of KL divergence. And it turns out that these three properties, you can find it in a more general class of statistical distances that has been studied from the 60s by Xisar, Alice Silvé, and so forth, which are called the F divergences. So for defining a F divergence, like KL, you have the integral on the support, but instead of taking the or minus log, what you do is you take any convex function. Okay? So you have this generic thing. If you put minus log egg, minus log for F, you recover, because of minus log, it swaps the numerator denominator, you recover Kullback-Leibler divergence. Okay? Then you can show basic things. Because F is convex, you can slide this integral inside that, and then you will see by Jensen inequality that it is at least f of 1. So basically, our convex function should have f1 equal to 0. Okay? And a very good thing also is that if I take f diamond as this expression, I find that it is again a convex function provided that f is convex. And basically, it swaps the argument quantity. So I will have f divergence of x1, x2 by f diamond, which is if of x2, x1. So I can symmetrize any kind of f divergence. Okay? And the symmetrized divergence for Kullback-Leibler is called Jeffreys or G divergence. So you have a full zoology of things that has been used in the literature for many optimization problems, but they can be encapsulated into this generic class. And why is that nice? Is that because first, F divergence, you can show that they are invariant, okay, when you compute F divergence under differentiable and invertible transformation. That means that if I introduce some, let's say, deterministic transformation y equal h of x, okay, any diffeomorphism, and I rewrite my density according to y from the density according to x. So the usual way to do it is to introduce the Jacobian matrix of transformation. Then you will have these invariant things. So this is very important. And what has also been proved more recently is that integration measures, okay, statistical distance invariant to diffeomorphisms, basically are F divergences. The proof for exhaustivity is just for the separable case. Okay, there are still a few things to tighten in that thing, but you have exhaustivity property very recently. So I think one very sometimes misleading stuff is that people think, okay, information geometry, Fisher information matrix, because and invariance, and they think that Fisher information matrix, which will be our tensor very soon, is independent of parameterization, and that's not true. Fisher information matrix, actually, when you change coordinate system, are varying covariantly. Okay, so basically, if I introduce two coordinate system, theta and eta, and I want to write the Fisher information matrix in the new coordinate system eta, knowing the transformation theta of eta and the Jacobian matrix, you will write it like that. Okay, so it's very important to know that Fisher FIM, I will call it FIM now, depends on the parameterization of the parameter space, okay? But for the viewpoint of geometry, for example, if you want to do Fisher-Riemannian geometry, which has been already started, people think it's Rao's paper in 1945, but actually you can find Hotelling notes in 1930s as a precursor. Then here, the infinitesimal element length, that is just the square root of the inner product of information of the tensor, then it will be the same, okay? So, because we can play with a change of transform, we can ask ourselves, is there always a coordinate system so that I can make I diagonal, so I can invert I very easily? And unfortunately, it's, except in a few cases, you can show it's not possible, okay? In 2D, you can always diagonalize the FIM. Actually, if you take one parameter theta and the other eta, you will have a diagonal. By construction, you will have a diagonal matrix. You can make it block diagonal by mixing theta and eta, but you cannot make it fully diagonal in the general case. Okay? Otherwise, people in deep learning will be very happy, but that's not the case. So now, if I take the Gaussian family and I compute the FIM, the Fisher information matrix, what will be happening is that you will recognize something, a metric structure. That is familiar to you, you will recognize that it is basically the hyperbolic metric used for the upper plane. Okay? And in fact, if you compute the Fisher information matrix for any location scale family, you can make it. You can make a connection with hyperbolic geometry. So that explains why there's a lot of hyperbolic geometry work coming into information geometry. Okay? So here I just display the tensor. So this is the metric tensor, that will be the FIM, okay? So it will be, for J, it will be the Hessian of our convex function f, the log normalizer. And here, in that case, you can make it scalar times identity, so it is a conformal representation, okay? So now we want to plug some geometry and to see how to reinterpret things on geometry and to give further properties. So the way to construct a geometry on a parametric family of distribution is to consider a smooth manifold induced by parametrization. And to define Riemannian geometry, you have to define the metric tensor here. That for the metric tensor, we define on each tangent plane on your manifold, it will define inner product, okay? And the inner product lets you measure the length of vector in that in tangent plane, but also a notion of angles, right? And it defines orthogonality, okay? So you will say that two vectors in a tangent plane P, in TP, which is a vector pair of the tangent plane, and we say that they are orthogonal in that tangent plane if their inner product is 0, okay? Usual things. And now, as we are very familiar to Riemannian geometry, we say that the distance is a metric length distance, and it is locally shortest path, okay? And actually, the big difference between usual Riemannian modeling in information geometry and the usual modeling of information geometry is that in information geometry, we use affine differential geometry. So we will have two dual geodesics that are coupled with the Fisher information matrix. And the properties that they have is that they parallel transport vectors, okay? And they are coupled with the FIM. This is a key thing. So what happens when you take the Riemannian geometry modeling is that from your metric tensor G, you take, by default, a connection that lets you express the parallel transport of vector that is called the Levi-Civita connection, okay? The Levi-Civita connection can be expressed as G, okay? But in fact, you can show that there are dually coupled affine connections, and this gives a structure where you don't have length, so this is why we call divergences instead of distances, and we will play with it for projection from now on, okay? So I told you about parallel transport, and I told you about connection, so I think I need a more drawing here and to let you know what's going on further. Let's say this is my family of Gaussian distribution. Okay, I see it as a 2D manifold, and I have tangent spaces, like in the Riemannian modeling at 2 points. And now what I want to do is I want to transport those two vectors in a tangent plane to another tangent plane that can be far away. Okay. When it is embedded in a Euclidean geometry, you can do it very naturally. But otherwise, what you need to do is to have a notion of what is parallel transportation. Okay. And you define parallel transportation according to a connection. Okay. And in information geometry, what we want to do is that I want to measure the angle here, and if I have parallel transported with two vectors, it should be the same angle here. Okay? And instead of having the same connection that I call it a prod here, I have dual connection, and the property is that those dual connections are basically coupled with the metric. Okay, with him. So what happens in the usual modeling that you might have seen before is that we take the Levi-Civita connection, as I said before, and we have the dual things that are similar. Okay, so this is thing. So this is a generalization somehow. Okay. Now, when you do differential geometry, you play with tensors always, right? Vectors are one-rank tensors, but you have, I told you about the metric tensors, which is the two tensors. So basically, the fact of the universe are tensors, right? And you want to do is to have components that depend on the coordinate of the system, and you want to do change of coordinates to make a computation or things. But basically, your objects are intrinsic, they are geometric, they are tensors, their nature doesn't change, right? Only the components can change depending on the coordinate system you've chosen, right? And in information geometry, like in Riemannian geometry, you have local coordinate systems everywhere, right? Each tangent space has a local coordinate system. So this means that in a tangent plane, we have always a dual vector basis, and this dual vector basis give rise to the complex notation where you have seen maybe sometimes it's superscript, sometimes it's subscript notation. Okay, so let me express that. We take a vector here, so this is my canonical basis vector here, and this is the components here. Okay, and because here I put lower subscript, here I will put upper script, right? What we would like to have is to write the components as a scalar product. So I would like to write things like that, okay? Okay. And the thing is that if I put a small component here, it will not work. It will not be true for except for orthonormal coordinate system. So if you want to write the component as an inner product, you need to introduce the dual basis, okay? And the dual basis is basically satisfying these things. You have dual vectors. I go very fast because this is not the point. This is just to introduce the subscript and upperscript notation. The dual basis has a property that you have that. So in case of orthonormal Cartesian coordinate system, nothing, it's self-dual, so you never see that. But if it's not orthonormal, you begin to see the differences, right? But the key point is to write components as inner product. And what we will say, it says that if it is upperscript, it's contravariant, and if it is underscript, I will say it's covariant. It is well-defined notion. So now I told you that from a convex function like the log normalizer of my exponential family, I can build a dually flat manifold. So how do we do that? Is that first my convex function has a Legendre dual, which is a convex function. I will write it F star. And I have two coordinate systems, right? I have theta and eta, and they're rated by Legendre transformation as follows. Okay, and my metric tensor G, which is giving rise to the statistical metric tensor of the statistical manifold, I can write it as a Hessian, either of F or of J. But in that case, I will have two. The components. The metric tensor is the same, but the components are either the covariant or contravariant components. And we have the property that we heard yesterday, the Clairaut equation, is that if you make the product of the Hessian matrices in a two-coordinate system, it's an identity matrix. Actually, this is the way you find the dual basis. Okay. And now what is very important from the Legendre transformation is that you have this Young inequality, that this thing is greater or equal to 0. Okay. And because it's this thing here is greater or equal to 0, it gives you to a notion of statistical distance that we call divergence. We call divergence because it is C3 differentiable, and basically we can get metric tensor and cubic tensor from it. But this is the thing. And if you rewrite this divergence, so this is called the canonical divergence in information geometry. And if you do it using one coordinate system, you get something very similar. You get Bregman divergence. Okay. So closing this thing, what I show you is that from F divergence have three good properties. I show you that from a convex function, you do a statistical manifold modeling that is not Riemannian with two dual connections. And now I will explain. So, of course, if you take this 1/2 of x squared, you get the Euclidean geometry as usual. Everything is self-dual. Okay, so it's a generalization of Euclidean geometry somehow of x. So now I want to go back to my minimization of KL and to show you that we can play with geometric words to show you that it is information projection. Okay? So, because I define two dual connection, I will play now with words. So I will say E or M, or E is usually the alpha, +1 connection and M is the -1 connection. So you have different things. But the basic thing is that whenever you have two distributions, P and Q, and you want to make the, let's say alpha is half, you want to know what is a half distribution, you have two ways to take the half distribution, whether you use that geodesic or the dual geodesic, right? So one will be called the mixture, because you just do a mixture, okay? And the other is called the exponential connection or exponential geodesic, because you will make it in the log space. And you need to normalize to make a distribution, okay? And also we will talk about E flat and M flats. So basically an E flat for exponential flat is if you just look in the coordinate system, it is just an affine subspace in the theta coordinate system, okay? And if you take the M flat, it's again affine subspace in eta coordinate system. So now I talk about projection, but projection is related to orthogonality and to Pythagoras theorem. For example, in Euclidean geometry, we know, okay, I have an affine space and I want to project P on that affine space. What do? Is basically you take the perpendicular projection. And why is that so? Is that because if it were not P star, you will have a point Q, let's say, and then you will have a Pythagoras theorem that says that it is not that, right? So projection is related to orthogonality, which is also related to Pythagoras for the proof. Okay, so this is what we are familiar with. And actually in information geometry, because I told you there are two ways to minimize the distance, whether it's a left-sided or right-sided argument, we have two projections, the E projection and the M projection. They correspond to minimize E projection here. So here you have the left-sided, okay? And here's the right-sided. And we know that this projection is unique if the subspace on which I want to project is the dual flat, okay? So if it is E projection, it should be M flat. And if it is M projection, it should be E flat, okay? So this you can prove very easily. There has been called, for example, Xisa in the 70s, he called it information projection and or reverse information projection, right? So now I just want to go back to my first part. I told you that Maxent is a minimization of KL divergence. So I have my prior distribution, which actually was H. I call it H in the form of things. And what I do is here I have my set of constraints. Because it's equal eta, it's a M flat. Okay, and I do a E projection, okay, and this I reinterpret my Maxent distribution as this guy, okay. And here we have Fisher orthogonality because we have the Fisher information matrix for defining orthogonality of inner product. And for the MLE, I told you that it is minimizing that guy, okay, and I introduce empirical distribution. So here you will see that this family is E flat. And this is an M projection. Okay, so basically you have a geometric word to define two dual projection, and you can reinterpret things that were known in information theory in geometric meaning. So this MLE actually, which has a closed form in eta coordinate system, is called the observed point in information geometry. And the T of X that I mentioned before is called sufficient statistics, because when you want to do inference, you can show that if you have the property that probability of X knowing the sufficient statistic and theta is the same as probability of X knowing T, that means that all information concerning your parameter to estimate has been statistically losslessly compressed in T. Okay? And actually with factorization theorem, we know that it is only exponential families that have this property. Okay? So it's kind of lossless statistical information. So now I want, in the last 10 minutes or 15 minutes, to show you more recent results. So so far it has been a tutorial where I introduced many things. Now I want to present new notion. You heard about Fisher information, and you heard about Shannon information. Now there's a new information that is also traditional. It's called Chernoff, and this is for classification and that I will present, and I will give you a geometric picture of what is Chernoff information. Okay, and this is 4 or 5 years old pictures. Okay. So what is the problem? In hypothesis testing, I say that I have observation X, and X can be let's say can be taken from a mixture of two distributions. Okay, it can be taken either from P0 or P1. And now I give you X1, and I say, okay, which of the components of my mixture is it from? So you have to make a decision, a statistical decision, and because the two potential queries share the same support, there's always some error, because you never show 100%, okay? What you want to do is to minimize the expected error of your decision rule, okay? So this is what is called hypothesis testing, and usually the first is called the null hypothesis, and H1, the other hypothesis, is called the alternative hypothesis. So basically, we want to do it in a more generic framework where we have not two but arbitrary number of mixture components, okay? And this is the probability of being correct in my decision rule is, of course, 1 minus my probability to be incorrect. And what we are interested in is to have the asymptotic regime exponent defined as, when you have M observation, as this component alpha here, okay? This is called Bayesian hypothesis testing because we manipulate in my mixture prior class probabilities. Okay, my weights of drawing for one component or to the other components. I will take 1/2 in the remainder. And then we have the notion of class conditional property, and my total probability is my mixture from which the observation are taken. Okay, and of course, because we always make error, but we need to minimize the expected error. Maybe it's more important to do not make an error, for example, to say that in asymmetric case, whether there's a signal or noise, for example, in detection, you don't want to make the same cost of making a misclassification. So you can introduce what is called a cost design matrix, and I will not PIG of U, the probability of making the decision using rule U. Okay, so now the probability of error, which is very standard in statistical pattern recognition, we note it PE. And here I will make, no cost if it is correct, and otherwise cost if it is incorrect. Okay, I told you it's an expectation over all the thing. And actually the rule that minimizes this probability of error is you can show very easily by even graphical arguments that it is a map rule for maximum a posteriori. What you would choose is to classify X according to the components that maximize the weighted components, okay? And you can show that the map Bayesian detectors is the one that minimizes the PE over all the rules. So I consider same weights of my mixture, and my probability of error, if I look at the diagram, I can write it like that, okay? P of X is my mixture, and here this is my class conditional probability, and this is a mean, okay? And the mean can be interpreted as what is called histogram intersection distance in computer vision, okay? And because I took 1/2, my probability of error is that, okay, from Bayes' rule. So now, the trick that Chernoff in the 50s did is to say that if I have a mean of two positive quantities, it is less than a geometric barycenter, okay? Why is that so? Is that because any quasi-arithmetic mean is contained in the mean and the max. Actually, it's true for many different kind of things. But because we usually have exponential families, the exponential and the product here is making the things very easily to slide the integral to get upper bound. The thing is that P is difficult to compute, and what we want to do is close form upper bounds. That was one of the motivation of Chernoff. Okay. So Chernoff has defined a distance that is called Chernoff information as choose the minimum exponential that minimize that, okay? And this is kind of a similarity coefficient, okay? And then you can show that the probability of error is less than that this is less than 1, and so basically it's less than something Chernoff information, okay? So this kind of framework we recently generalized by taking over means, family of means. So the map decision rule, when I have two distributions belonging to the same exponential family, you can show actually that it amounts to a Bregman divergence on the natural parameters, or as a canonical divergence on the mixed parameterization. Because I have always dual coordinate system, I can, whenever I have a formula, I can replace one eta by a theta because by taking the reverse. So I have many equivalent formulae. Okay. So for the KL here, I have, because it's two parameters, I have 4 equivalent formulae. Okay. And there's something very interesting also for when you manipulate Bregman divergence with exponential family, is that there's a bijection between exponential families and dual Bregman divergence. That means that if you recall that the log of your probability is that, you can write it as a Bregman divergence term here. Okay? And the map decision rule, actually, which is this one that I showed you before, amounts to a mean, because here I have a minus. Okay? So basically here you can see that it is kind of a Voronoi diagram defined for the dual Bregman divergence and with a weight. Okay? So if you can compute that, then it's fine. So now to answer classification, basically what we will do is we will do computational geometry using Bregman divergence, and we will define new class of data structures to make fast queries. Like for example here, you will have a partition of the space into entropic balls, into Kullback-Leibler balls, so that if I give you a query point, you can very easily report which portion of the distribution is false in, okay, which is the max in the map rule. Now to go back to the geometry of the best error exponent, here we have the affinity coefficient, and we can also, when it's exponential family, you can write it as an exponential of minus a Berbera-Rao divergence, which I call Jensen divergence here with a skew. So F is convex, so this thing is always positive or equal to 0. And the theorem that you have is a generalization of what we know for Kullback-Leibler in the Covers and Thomas book as well, is that the Chernoff information is a Bregman divergence for exponential family at the optimal exponent value. So if I know the best alpha that minimizes the quantity before, I will show that this expression of Chernoff information amounts to that. And geometrically, what you can see is that if you have here W1 and W2 is 1/2, so I have my two distributions on my flat manifolds, and what I do is I have the E geodesic. Okay, I can work when I have two distributions. I can work on E geodesic or M geodesic. So if I work on E geodesic, this is what people have been called Ellinger arc. Okay, an Ellinger arc, and you can show that this to find the best exponent, it is the intersection of the exponential geodesic with the M Voronoi bisector. Okay, with the dual Bregman bisector. So this can be in closed form or not. If you have, if you make a computation, sometimes if it is 1D, you have obviously a closed form, but otherwise, geometrically, you can characterize exactly what it is, but you are not, maybe you don't have a closed form solution, right? So maybe we can say that this is the power of geometry, is to have also Cartesian analytic geometry, but also synthetic geometry. Okay, and here you have a synthetic geometry. Okay, if I put in equation this thing here, I mentioned the E geodesic and M bisector, they are defined like that, so you will see, but this is just the equation for that. And now when I have multiple hypotheses, you can show that the Chernoff distance is the minimum of pairwise Chernoff distance, right? This is also a very common result. And if you compute, now you have a set of potential components. So if you compute the Bregman-Voronoi diagrams for those components, when they are from exponential family, you want to find the problem becomes the closest Bregman pair. Okay. So what I want, the point here, I want to show you that Bregman computational geometry is helpful for statistical analysis. This is the key point. I know it's a pretty dense material for first exposure, but I hope you will go to the slides if you're interested into it. And the picture that we will have is, instead of having an M bisector with an E geodesic, we will have an eta Voronoi diagram with all the geodesic arcs, and we know that for Voronoi cells here, we call the neighbors natural neighbors, and we know that the optimal component will be defined by the Chernoff distribution from one of the things. Okay, so we have a way to compute combinatorially faster Chernoff information for multiple hypotheses. So this is a recap. It has been pretty dense for that. So I define a probability error. I show you that the map rule is optimal. And for exponential family, it becomes additive Bregman-Warren diagram. And then I show you that we can do some kind of synthetic information geometry by characterizing the exact solution as an intersection of each geodesic with a dual bisector. This is the point. Okay. So now I go very, very fast. There are many 3 or 4 minutes to remember. First, some recent results on clustering. When we do machine learning and unsupervised learning, there's a lot of clustering problems. Yeah, 5 minutes. And what we want to do is to cluster in information spaces, okay? And probably, as you know, in quantization and information things, we use often the K-means algorithm, which is a minimization of the square Euclidean distance, which is a Bregman divergence, okay? And here, we define centroid as a convex combination for any potential divergence, right? So if it is unique, of course, we want centroid to be unique, so we ask that to be unique. And basically, if you take D to be the Bregman, you get a closed form. If you take symmetrized, then it's a bit more delicate. But for non-positive things, we have closed form using a Lambert W function. Otherwise, we have a few things. And because in application, we are also interesting to robustness. Like if you have outlier data, not to be very perturbated by that. There's the notion of influence function and breakpoint in robustness. Then we extended the Bregman and the Jensen divergence using the word total. Like when you have line fitting, you can do ordinary line fitting by mean square or total least square, right? So this is the metaphor that we use, and we did that recently. And of course, we can do more things. This is just a kind of survey. I'm not going to do that. I want to mention that very recently in information geometry, people have been working on conformal divergences, which are divergence that can be expressed as with a multiplication factor here, right? You have a conformal metric and things like that. So this is the last part in 2 minutes. I'm very interesting in the meaning of distances, because there's a full zoology of information, a full zoology from the viewpoint of mathematical formulae. And actually, when I started, I made a kind of poster of how things are related, okay? So this is a historical poster of distances. You can find from my homepage if you're interested. It's maybe 10 years old now. And I say, okay, this is really, there's a dictionary by Michel Deza on distances also. And this is very fascinating world because so many distances for which application, for what properties is a natural question, right? And instead of thinking like that, we prefer to aggregate class of distances and to try to have the best aggregation by understanding what is the exhaustive property of each class. Why is a class of distance important for which property? And is that property only satisfied by that class of distance, right? So we have been driven by that, and we simplify this kind of thing into still something a bit complex, but into this kind of things, right? So, and very recently, for the last 5 years, there's a lot of works on what we call projective divergences, which are for a normalized model independent of the scaling. So this is very important because the F that I mentioned, usually we cannot have it computationally tractable. Because, for example, for discrete model like Ising or Pot, and people have been working on projective divergence. Of course, computing with statistical distance, if you program, because it takes time, you don't want to make Monte Carlo or things like that. You try to find tricks to accelerate or to give bounds on your estimation. There's a few things that has been done. I'm not going. This is for the survey part. If you're interested, look at it. I now want to just conclude in 2 minutes on maybe what could be one potential rod for extension of Shannon information theory. Of course, geometrically biased by my interest. For me, I've been kind of playing with what I call computational information geometry that you nicely mentioned in my introduction. And for me, computation is a science of transformation. It's a kind of Lavoisier. Something is lost. And information is kind of science of communication. We talk a lot about the confusion between that and that, right? But I think from data and model, there's communication too. And sufficiency information and redundancy is probably the free notion to look at that. And geometry is, of course, you don't want to be biased by what chosen form when you type your data, right? You want to be, you have class of types and you want to be invariant by that, and this is why you need to have geometry. And so far, IAG has been very strong, and computation has been seen as an engineering thing, but computation is like, like Kolmogorov, an algorithmic theory. It has a strong thing, what can be computed and from what cannot be computed, and it's important to take also computation at the same level as information and geometry has been considered, I think, and I expect it to have further developments. Okay. So this is what's going on in the community right now. I'm not going to detail that, and I prefer to address questions or remarks as a conclusion. Thank you for your listening. Oh yeah, some shameless promotion. We organize every 2 years conferences. The next one will be in Paris in next year. So it's called GSI for Geometric Science of Information. And also we recently published edited books if you want to keep track of what's going on in that. Okay.
So maybe we have time for 1 or 2 quick questions.
How tight are the bounds you obtain on the probability of error in the framework of Bayesian hypothesis testing?
They are very bad.
Okay.
To be honest, they are very bad because the way that Chernoff information bounds is by the trick of what we want is to we want to play mathematics, right? We want to play with something like that, which is a histogram intersection distance, and we don't know really to play with that. So what we do is that we want to bound that locally and then to slice the integral, right? To get a closed form solution here, right? And what has been done is to say that the mean is always less than that. Okay? And actually, if you have yesterday also we talked about a monotonically increasing function f, okay? You can define f means as you take the representation of your number, okay? And you take f minus 1 of that. So this is called Kolmogorov-Nagumo means, okay? And this, because it's a mean, not because in the mean it's also between mean and max, okay? So basically this way Chernoff did is by choosing the geometric mean by the f, but you can take different f, right? So now if I take the mean, if I take my bounds for all possible means, there are different things, but still it's not good. It's a very difficult thing. Okay, so people go Monte Carlo and confidence interval and things like that, usually, right? Or you have very tight bounds on that. You have paper 20 years ago, but you don't know how to slice the integral into that. So you have some papers that was called optimal bound on Bayes or arbitrary tight, but actually in that paper, I think it's from the 80s, you cannot slice the integral, so you cannot end up with a closed form solution.
Okay, thank you.
Oui, j'avais une question. Tout est basé sur la transformée de Legendre et la dualité entre les deux potentiels. Donc hier, on a parlé de thermodynamique et en fait, cette dualité, elle est apparue d'abord en thermodynamique avec Massieu et avec l'entropie et l'énergie libre. Il y avait deux paramètres du haut qui étaient la chaleur et la température de Planck. Et je pense que c'est ça qui a donné à l'idée à Poincaré d'introduire la fonction caractéristique en proba, parce qu'il utilise une transformée de Laplace, et il l'appelle aussi fonction caractéristique comme Massieu, sauf qu'il prend un log.
Log de Laplace, c'est ça, hein, c'est le log de Laplace. Ouais.
Et est-ce que tu as regardé des travaux en thermodynamique? Parce qu'en thermodynamique, la métrique de Fischer, c'est une capacité thermique en fait en thermodynamique. Donc est-ce que les gens en thermodynamique cherchent des choses qui pourraient intéresser les gens en géométrie de l'information?
Non, je dois confesser que je n'ai pas regardé. Je sais qu'il y a des beaux articles qui paraissent récemment. Je suis vraiment intéressé par le côté structure de données, algorithmique, exploitation en application. Donc je n'ai pas parlé parce que c'était trop court. C'est pour ça que dans le titre de ma présentation, j'ai enlevé N applications. Mais je suis plutôt intéressé par l'application en vision, machine learning, etc. Et un peu moins philosophiquement, aussi comme on en parlait hier, le lien entre entropie thermodynamique et entropie formule de Shannon. Donc c'est très très intéressant. Malheureusement, le temps est une ressource limitée.
So let's thank the speaker again.